All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to pull apart two of the most powerful and, honestly, most dangerous forces in human psychology. How groups manipulate us and how propaganda really works. We're going to get right under the hood to see how a single mind can be captured, and then how that gets scaled up to move entire crowds.
And this quote just sets the stage perfectly, doesn't it? We're not talking about some abstract, academic idea here. These are the very forces that can push a society towards stability or send it spiraling into chaos. So let's get into it.
We're going to start at the micro level, with just one person. How does someone's identity get isolated and then, well, captured? It's a pretty methodical process, and you know what? It almost never starts the way you'd think.
This right here is the absolute core truth of it. Manipulation doesn't begin with obvious control or with threats. No, it starts with an offer, a sense of belonging, an instant community, maybe a purpose you've been searching for. It feels like a solution, which is exactly what makes it so incredibly effective. Okay, so here's the playbook. First, they capture your identity, making it so leaving the group feels like you're losing a piece of yourself. Then, they narrow your information, not by banning it, but by teaching you that every outside source is out to get you, that it's all hostile or wrong. Next, the group slowly replaces your family, your friends, and even your own moral compass. Suddenly, any doubt feels like a deep, personal betrayal. This is followed by a gradual erosion of boundaries. They start with small asks that slowly escalate until you're in way over your head. And the final lock? That's the shame and redemption loop. It convinces you that you're flawed and only the group can save you.
Okay, so that's how it works on one person. But how does this scale up? Let's look at how these individual vulnerabilities get amplified in a crowd, creating this kind of mob morality where the normal rules of right and wrong just seem to evaporate.
I mean, this is the central question, right? Most of us have moral lines we wouldn't cross when we're acting alone. So why does that hesitation so often disappear in a group? Well, the answer lies in a few key psychological tricks that our brains play on us in real time.
The first, and maybe the most powerful, is this: diffusion of responsibility. When you're in a crowd, that feeling of accountability gets spread out so thin it almost disappears. Your actions feel less personal, less yours. This is how online mobs form and riots can break out. No single person feels fully responsible for what happens.
And then there's something called identity fusion. The personal I starts to shrink, and the collective we gets bigger and bigger. Your own conscience gets put on a shelf, and the group's morality takes over. At that point, questioning the group feels like you're betraying yourself, and that's a terrifying thought. So you conform.
And there are a few things that act like gasoline on this fire. Emotions, especially anger and fear, can spread through a crowd like a virus, completely bypassing rational thought. The group rewards loud, simple, black and white certainty, and it punishes nuance, so people learn pretty quickly to just shut up and go along. And finally, you've got visibility pressure, especially online, where people perform their outrage just to show they're loyal and to protect their own status in the group. And this brings us right to social media, which, feels like it was almost perfectly designed to create these exact mob conditions. The platforms reward speed over reflection. The algorithms push the most emotionally triggering stuff to the top of your feed. And the distance of the screen, it just dehumanizes the targets. They stop being people and become just usernames, causing empathy to absolutely plummet. So now that we get the individual and the group, let's zoom all the way out to the macro level. How do smart leaders and organizations intentionally weaponize all of this? Turns out they use a very specific and very powerful playbook.
This is the secret. It's not just about fear. The most effective propaganda is this potent cocktail. It pulls you in with a sense of love, of belonging, of being special, and then it uses fear to lock the door right behind you.
Here's how that 1-2 punch works. The love-based framing, it creates this intense emotional safety and loyalty. It makes you feel like you're part of a family that's worth protecting at all costs. Then comes the fear-based framing, which introduces some external enemy, creating an urgent us versus them battle for survival. One side pulls you close, the other convinces you that you can never ever leave.
So the crucial point is the combination. It's not one or the other, it's both. Love says, this group is your home. And fear says, and your home is about to be destroyed. The result? A powerful, urgent, and aggressive kind of loyalty, where people become willing to do almost anything to protect what they love.
And this is exactly why it's so incredibly difficult to reason with someone who's caught in this mindset. Any challenge, no matter how logical or well-intentioned, isn't processed as a simple disagreement. It's heard as a direct, existential attack on their identity, their family, their very sense of who they are. And leaders have specific tactics to keep this emotional grip tight. They'll create controlled controversies just to get attention and rally their base. They'll frame any disagreement as an existential threat. And they will polarize every complex issue into a simple choice: good versus evil, loyal versus traitor. It makes any kind of dissent feel incredibly dangerous.
So, after all that, given all this powerful machinery, how can any of us resist? Well, the good news is we can. The sources point to a system of psychological self-defense. So let's look at the tools you can actually use to build your own mental shield.
This quote, "This is a powerful diagnostic tool, a mental shortcut. If a group's sense of belonging can only survive by being in a constant state of fear or outrage toward an enemy, that's a massive red flag. Healthy groups, healthy families, they don't need fear to justify their existence."
So here's a practical toolkit for building that resilience. First, just learn to pause and recognize when your own emotions are being triggered. Second, start practicing dissent in safe ways. Normalize questioning things. Third, always ask who benefits from this story and check multiple sources. And finally, reframe loyalty. Your ultimate loyalty should be to the truth and to preventing harm, not to any single person or idea.
So, here's the bottom line. You can't become immune to influence. It's just part of being human. But you can become aware of it. And in this game, awareness is your most powerful form of defense. Just recognizing the machinery is the very first step to disarming it. In the end, if you're ever asking yourself, how could they do that? How could they believe that? This is the savage answer. It's the simplest and most haunting summary of this entire mechanism. Someone felt loved and like they belonged, and then they were made to feel that their source of love was under attack. That combination, it can override almost anything else. And so we end with this. The next time you see a group that's bound together tightly by a shared fear, ask yourself these two questions. Who benefits from this emotion, and who gains power from this unity? The answers will usually tell you everything you need to know.